Hey guys, continuing Iamblichus' Exhortation to Philosophy text, chapter 11. So this chapter, Iamblichus says that to have a philosophical life is to have the most pleasant and useful life. And he puts forth arguments to prove this in a very logical and easy to understand way. And the chapter begins by him saying there are two parts to life. One part is having a life. This is a passive part. And the other part is actually living it, the active part. So I think in the text he says there's a capacity to have something, and then there's actually using that. And then he goes forth to make a few logical demonstrations. He says, look at sight. He says the passive aspect is we have sight, and the active aspect is actually seeing. And by seeing, he means actually using the sight. So a person can just have sight but not really use it, or they can have it and use it. And he says, which is happier? The person who simply has the sight, or if they're using it intentionally in different ways. And he proceeds to say, in the same way we have these two things called knowledge and science. Let's say if we just have, so the way I saw it is basically he split it in this kind of like two levels. So it says similar to having a sight is when we have knowledge of something. But that's just knowledge. We're not really practically using it. When we start to practically use it, it becomes science. This is the active sort of use of knowledge, so to say. So essentially this is, as I was saying, to have, and this is to use that which you have. And the point of all of this is, as we refer to the powers of the soul. So in the same way, we have, let's say, the reasoning power, and this is how I understand it. He didn't make it more explicit from what I remember, but now is my interpretation. We have the reasoning power, but most people do not quite use it. But they have it. So the question is, who is happier? The one who just has the reasoning powers, or the one who applies them to everything in life? Clearly the one who applies them, because he will make the things that he applies them to, he'll make them better. He'll make them more useful, he'll make them more good, and so forth. More pleasant. So this is my interpretation. And as I understand it, the reasoning powers we have, they kind of need to be developed, or in terms of Platonism, kind of cleaned up, let's say, to say it like that, because they're clogged up by the way we live our life. So we clean up these powers by developing a more self-control over ourselves. That frees up the energy. Energy goes higher and into the mind, and the mind can then use that energy to perceive higher things. If we study the types of things that we could perceive. So the importance of studying philosophy then is to basically to make ourselves move in this direction. So for now we have different powers of the soul, but they're not kind of activated. We do not really use them. When we study philosophy, we're starting to go into the active form of life. We're starting to actively use these powers. And we feel this at the very beginning. When we start to read the first text, we feel very uncomfortable. We start to fall asleep. Sometimes people feel anger arise when people read Plato, for example, for the first time. Or they think they feel a very like tiredness and like they don't understand anything. This is where starting to exercise that muscle, the dianoetic powers of the soul, the reasoning powers of the soul, the muscle that has been neglected. We're starting to exercise it. And if we break through that barrier, then we start to discover later that it's much easier. Not only it's easier to read these texts, but they generate a certain ecstasy and enjoyment, realizations, flashes in the mind, and so forth. And our life starts to turn around as we read this. It's because we're starting to actively use the powers of the soul that relate to reasoning abilities. This is my interpretation of this chapter. So it's not enough to have reason. We need to use it and develop it, essentially. And to do that, we need to study philosophy. That's how I understood it. That's it for this part. For this chapter, I have six videos. So this is the first one. Now, as always, I'll do a mini meditation, and you're welcome to do whichever meditation you want to do. And after that, we'll close the video. Okay. In the commentaries below this video, please write what realizations and understandings this part of this chapter brought within you. It'd be very useful for me and for everyone to see what wakes up in people's minds when they read this. And do this for every of my videos. Then we can generate very powerful knowledge base of the things that people realize from this text. Thank you. And now a video will appear. You're welcome to click it if you want to.